everyone, welcome back to the Ukulele Club channel. I'm Kalani, your host and teacher, and I'm really pleased to have an experienced music educator. Chris Russell is here with us. Hey Chris, thanks for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Kalani.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. I know you've been doing a lot with the ukulele and teaching, and then you have a valuable resource. I want to make sure we get that in and get that information out to people before we finish today. I have a question for you though, and a lot of teachers might be new to teaching the ukulele, but even if they're experienced, especially now, we're having kids back in the classroom. We have the live sessions. I just wanted to get your take on I want to get a picture of what happens in your first week teaching the ukulele or your first classes. What are your priorities? What do you do? What do you not do? Et cetera, et cetera. So the first week back in school or starting an ukulele class, what's your kind of main goals and strategies there?
Okay, in that first week, the first thing to do is to establish those expectations. What are your processes and procedures going to be, and you have to teach that. I've been reminded through some various classroom management techniques that basically you have to teach and reteach and reteach. So basically you have to teach everything from how do you get the ukuleles to how do you hold the ukuleles, how do you walk with the ukuleles. So you have to do that first. You have to set those expectations and then you have to revisit them. You might even want to have posters in your room that have the main points of your expectations. That goes back to an envoy technique so that you can even just stop and point at something rather than having to say it. That can be just as effective and also keep your blood pressure down. And you have to think about also like what are your expectations? So for example, I don't have students tune ukuleles, and if I do, I have a class that I teach way down the road and then basically introduce the process and then invite individual students that want to give it a try to give it a try and then watch them. I would never, with a class set of, for example, 32 students or something like that, just let them go and tune, because that's a disaster waiting to happen. Now again, I'm teaching 5th grade, but I don't even think I would have done that when I was teaching middle school. Maybe high school you could, but even then you'd be walking around to each spot. So if, like for example, the expectation is that you talk about don't touch the tuners, then you don't touch the tuners, things like that. After that, one of the real key things is to get them holding and playing the instrument as soon as you can. So for me, that might be day 1, it might be day 2. I only see students twice a week for 30 minutes in a normal year. Last year we saw them every day for 2 weeks for an hour a day. It was a little bit crazy. So with just 30 minutes twice a week, the first day just might be going over parts of the ukulele, talking about the expectations with the ukulele, and then the second class for sure is going to be playing and holding. And believe it or not, that first class is going to take you a whole 30 minutes with that many students just to play the C chord. So it would be introducing what frets are, what the strings are. I usually teach with the Aquila colored strings. They're actually called kid strings. And one of the cool things about them, or those strings, is that Aquila sells them directly to teachers and schools in bulk at a far cheaper price than you can even buy fishing line for your ukulele. Some people like to use fluorocarbon fishing line because it's cheaper. Well, these end up being even cheaper, and it makes it so much easier to teach. So students, you can say, blue string, 3rd fret, and then slowly turn away to the traditional 1st string, 3rd fret, but they can adapt to that over time. But anyway, so you walk around the room and you get everybody playing the C chord, and then the final thing that we would do is we'd play songs with just the C chord, and there are a few of them out there. The play-alongs we've made, there are a few videos where it's just one chord, and those are always going to be folk songs. They're never going to be pop songs, but kids will put up with that for a couple of weeks. You can get away with folk songs for a couple of weeks, but then at some point you're going to have to move to other resources that have more meaning in their life. I hate to say it that way, but once we start playing with this instrument, the ukulele, they want to become the YouTube stars and the YouTube people that they see singing and playing the songs that they know and love. They don't necessarily want to be playing Three Blind Mice, for very long.
Right.
So that's, I mean, that really summarizes that first week for me. So it'd be parts of the ukulele, perhaps history of the ukulele. There are a couple of guys out there called the Atomic Sharks that have 1-minute ukulele videos that very quickly talk about parts of the ukuleles or sizes of the ukuleles or history of the ukulele. And you can even pop a couple of those 1-minute videos into a 30-minute lesson at various times and cover those bases. So that first week, introduce the instrument, introduce expectations, and get them playing that first chord.
Great. Yeah, and you're right. There is a lot of music. I like to start off with one chord songs, and one finger chords, actually. So C, C7, A minor, A7, and the easy F or F9, and explore those right at the beginning because it's easy. But I love your point about just, establish your goals and objectives and then get some ground rules, so you don't have chaos. And it's going to be easier for all the students. So holding, not tuning, what are the parts? Play the C chord, let's do some music, right? Any pentatonic melody you can do with one chord, right? And then move on from there. And I like that you mentioned playing some of their preferred music. I think that is really important. It makes the lessons a lot more sticky, and they're going to be more motivated to learn the songs that they love. And there's a transition period there. You can sprinkle it in, right? It's not all or nothing. So they can still learn some of the classic, folk, classroom, children's, etc. songs. And while you start to pepper in some of the pop tunes and things.
Yeah, and again, I'm not anti-folk music by any means of the imagination. I follow the Fire Up and First Steps method with my K through 2 students, and that's folk song based, totally in support of folk music. I love folk music, but there is a relevancy to this instrument that exists that isn't in other places. I love recorder, but recorder doesn't have relevancy in our culture, although it does with the Mandalorian. The alto recorder with the Mandalorian theme, right? But it lacks that cultural relevancy. Whereas this instrument, I keep hearing my wife tripping upon commercials, and you hear the ukulele all the time.
Yeah.
And you hear it, in all kinds of music now. And you've got people like Billie Eilish, even though as we're recording this, she just recently had a big faux pas from her past that popped up. But anyway, the instrument is so culturally connected that if they're just playing folk songs, it won't be too long before they're asking, why can't we do music that's our music too? The other thing I was just thinking about too, as we talk about beginning things, is how you have to ask yourself as a teacher how you want to handle what we call noodling on the ukulele. And that's what happens when somebody is just noodling around and playing around. And in a teaching setting, depending on your personality, that could push you over the edge. Now, one of the great things about the ukulele is that even if kids don't fully participate, and in my experience, every kid plays, but not all kids really work on playing the right chords, if that makes sense. Some don't really want to do that. Some can't do that. And Robin Giebelhausen is another music educator. She runs Sound Education or soundeducators.org. But she has a saying, which is kids will learn the chords as they are able. They will come to it if you just keep going. So, we have this natural tendency with outcome-based education in part of our history to want to get 80% of the kids on board before we move forward. Sometimes you have to keep moving forward before everybody has it because they will catch up at their own speed. But even if you have kids that really are just strumming an open C6 chord, which to me is boring, why you'd want to just play all day long, I have no idea. But there are kids that will do that for an entire class session. Even if that happens, that doesn't really hurt the sound too much in your room. Now, you wouldn't want that in an ensemble if you're going to teach ukulele like an ensemble. But with noodling, you have to figure out as a teacher what level of noodling can you handle. So if you can't handle kids picking strings or whatever while you're talking, you're going to have to establish, a strings down sort of mantra or a symbol or a sign or a signal that you send to students that says the strings have to go down now and you don't play any longer while I'm talking. My own threshold for that is much higher than I think many other teachers. So with a lot of the stuff that I do, I have it made in a technological sort of way so that it's the speakers in the room supporting me rather than my own voice. So I can deal with a lot more noodling than some other people. But if you are a person that will be driven by that noodling, driven crazy by that noodling, you need to figure out an answer for that and set that up as part of your routine as well.
That's a great point, and that's management. It's also self-management, just taking care of yourself, like being honest with yourself about, like you said, how much noodling can you handle. I like the noodling, but there's a time and a place, and I actually did a video called Chords with a K, like K-O-R-D-Z, and I said, you can let your students find their own chords and make their own music from that. It doesn't have to be the traditional chords that you see in the back of every ukulele book chords. It can be something else, right? But the point is, right, like you said, they're going to make music and they're going to find their way. And I love that because we all ultimately are our own teachers, right? We have to teach ourselves how to play an instrument. You can't make somebody learn. You can just give them opportunities and information and resources, right? Individuals teach themselves how to do things through practice and attention and learn, that. But our job is to motivate them, give them the time, give them the space. But to your point, when everybody is noodling, it could sound super chaotic. I don't mind that. There was a guitar teacher, I asked about, how doesn't listening to, I said, don't you get tired of listening to all these people like just playing all day, like, random? And he said, no, that's just the sound of people learning. It's exciting. So that's always stuck with me. I like that. So if you can reframe it, maybe it's the sound of people learning, right?
And one of the great things about this instrument is that it actually does allow students to learn on their own. You're going to have students that will go out and buy their own ukulele. They will, because, you can get into some really affordable ukuleles, such as the Parapole Classic that you're holding right now, right? As an example of that. But there are some really affordable ukuleles out there that are quite good at a low price point. And so they'll buy their own, and those kids will take off on your own. My proudest moment was a few years ago teaching middle school, and I had a student that went out and created an entire song and recorded it, and then actually made a video of it with an entire thing, and did a green screen and everything to it. And that student would have never done that had we not studied ukulele. And you're going to get those kids that are just going to sail with this, and they'll be able to do so in a different way than with any other instrument. So that, we're getting slightly off topic, but what an amazing thing. One of our goals of music education is to make lifelong learners and performers and consumers of music. And what a wonderful instrument that they can actually honestly use for the rest of their life. It's pretty amazing.
Exactly. Yeah, you're exactly right. And that is the thing that kind of sets ukulele apart these days from some of the other, what we call classroom instruments. Aside from maybe the percussion stuff, I think that they can definitely use those skills. But ukulele, absolutely. They're seeing people on YouTube. They're hearing it in commercials. There's a long history of ukulele playing, and from pop to folk to Hawaiian style to jazz and then there's, of course, now a lot of the guitar people are pivoting towards ukulele because of the popularity. So there's even more ways people can relate to it and use it. Well, before we go, we're going to do some other videos and other interviews, but for this one, I just want to, before we wrap up, also to acknowledge and thank Parapole for providing this ukulele, Parapole Classic Ukulele. You can find out more at parapole.com. And Chris, where can people find out more about you, what you're doing, and connect with some of the resources that you have?
Yeah, there are 3 places. My blog is ukestuff.info. The channels, the big one is the Uke Playlong channels, which is youtube.com/ukeplaylongs. And then there's my instructional and review channel, which is youtube.com/ukestuff. The third and final resource would be a resource called ukulele.org, where you can actually put in the chords that you know, and it will give you a list of play-along videos like I make and then other people make that you can then use. So if your students only know 2 or 3 chords, you can plug them in, and then it'll pop out the different songs and videos that you can play along with your students. So those are the resources that I'd point people to that I'm connected to.
That's fantastic. Isn't it amazing the amount of ukulele-related resources that exist right now? That also is just, it's immense. It's exploded, which is awesome.
And it really doubled down with COVID. So all the people that used to be ukulele artists that traveled and went to all the music festivals and ukulele festivals, they were suddenly at home and they still had to survive. So we had an entire influx of people into the YouTube world that weren't there before. So that just, like, the resources just doubled exponentially overnight.
Right. It's really amazing and awesome. Well, thank you, and we will do some other videos. So everybody that's watching, please like and subscribe, of course. Hit the bell so you get notifications, and we will have Chris back on another video, which you can search for and find. But thanks for watching, and we'll see you all soon.